the East Coast, and the moment of truth has arrived. Welcome to the first debate night of the 2016 presidential campaign, live from Quicken Loans Arena in Cleveland, Ohio. I'm Megyn Kelly, along with my co-moderators, Brett Baer and Chris Wallace. Tonight, thousands of people here in the queue, along with millions of voters at home, will get their very first chance to see the candidates face off in a debate, answering the questions you want answered.
Less than a year from now, in this very arena, one of these 10 candidates, or one of the 7 on the previous debate tonight, will accept the Republican Party's nomination. Tonight's candidates were selected based on an average of 5 national polls. Just a few hours ago, you heard from the candidates ranked 11 through 17, and now the primetime event, the top 10.
Also of note, Fox News is partnering for tonight's debate with Facebook. For the past several weeks, we've been asking you for questions for the candidates on Facebook. Nearly 6 million of you, 6 million, viewed the debate videos on our site, and more than 40,000 of you submitted questions, some of which you will hear us asking the candidates tonight.
As for the candidates who will be answering those questions, here they are, positioned on the stage by how they stand in the polls. In the center of the stage tonight, businessman Donald Trump. Former Florida Governor Jeb Bush. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker. Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee.
Neurosurgeon Dr. Ben Carson. Texas Senator Ted Cruz. Florida Senator Marco Rubio.
Kentucky Senator Rand Paul. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. And your very own Governor of Ohio, John Kasich. Brett. Brett, I think you would call that a home field advantage.
It might be. It might be. We'll see.
Listen, the rules. Some objections coming.
It might be. The rules for tonight are simple. 1 minute for answers, 30 seconds for follow-ups, and if a candidate runs over, you'll hear this. Pleasant, no? We also have a big crowd here with us tonight in the home of the Cavaliers, as I mentioned. And while we expect them to be enthusiastic, as you heard, we don't want to take anything away from the valuable time for the candidates. So we're looking for somewhere between a reaction to a LeBron James dunk and the Cleveland Public Library across the street. Somewhere there we'll find a balance tonight. Without further ado, let's begin. Gentlemen, we know how much you love hand-raising questions. So we promise this is the only one tonight, the only one. Is there anyone on stage, and can I see hands, who is unwilling tonight to pledge your support to the eventual nominee of the Republican Party and pledge to not run an independent campaign against that person? Again, we're looking for you to raise your hand now. Raise your hand now if you won't make that pledge tonight. Mr. Trump. So, Mr. Trump, to be clear, you're standing on a Republican primary debate.
I fully understand.
The place where the RNC will give the nominee the nod.
I fully understand.
And that experts say an independent run would almost certainly hand the race over to Democrats and likely another Clinton. You can't say tonight that you can make that pledge.
I cannot say. I have to respect the person that if it's not me, the person that wins. If I do win and I'm leading by quite a bit, that's what I want to do. I can totally make that pledge. If I'm the nominee, I will pledge I will not run as an independent. But, and I am discussing it with everybody, but I'm, talking about a lot of leverage. We want to win, and we will win. But I want to win as the Republican. I want to run as the Republican nominee.
So tonight you can't say if another one of these...
This is what's wrong. I mean, This is what's wrong. He buys and sells politicians of all stripes. He's already,
Dr. Paul.
hey, look, he's already hedging his bet on the Clintons, okay? So if he doesn't run as a Republican, maybe he supports Clinton or maybe runs as an independent.
Okay.
But I'd say that he's already hedging his bets because he's used to buying politicians.
Well, I've given him plenty of money.
Just to be clear, you can't make it. We're going to move on. You're not going to make the pledge tonight.
I will not make the pledge at this time.
Okay. All right.
That's what. Gentlemen, our first round of questions is on the subject of electability in the general election. And we start tonight with you, Dr. Carson. You are a successful neurosurgeon, but you admit that you have had to study up when it comes to foreign policy, saying there's a lot to learn. Your critics say that your inexperience shows. You suggested that the Baltic states are not a part of NATO, and just months ago you were unfamiliar with the major political parties and government in Israel. And domestically, you thought Alan Greenspan had been Treasury Secretary instead of Federal Reserve Chair. Aren't these basic mistakes, and don't they raise legitimate questions about whether you are ready to be president?
Well, I could take issue with all of those things, but we don't have time. But I will say we have a debate here tonight, and we will have an opportunity to explore those areas. And I'm looking very much forward to demonstrating that, in fact, the thing that is probably most important is having a brain and to be able to figure things out and learn things very rapidly. So, you know, experience comes from a large number of different arenas. And America became a great nation early on, not because it was flooded with politicians, but because it was flooded with people who understood the value of personal responsibility, hard work, creativity, innovation, and that's what will get us on the right track now as well.
Senator Rubio, when Jeb Bush announced his candidacy for presidency, he said this: there's no passing off responsibility when you're a governor, no blending into the legislative crowd. Could you please address Governor Bush across the stage here and explain to him why you, someone who has never held executive office, are better prepared to be president than he is, a man who you say did a great job running your state of Florida for 8 years?
Well, thank you for the question, Chris, and it's great to be here tonight. Let me begin by saying this. I'm not new to the political process. I was making a contribution as the Speaker of the third largest and most diverse state in the country well before I even got into the Senate. I would add to that this election cannot be a resume competition. It's important to be qualified, but if this election is a resume competition, then Hillary Clinton's going to be the next president because she's been in office and in government longer than anybody else running here tonight. Here's what this election better be about. This election better be about the future, not the past. It better be about the issues our nation and the world is facing today, not simply the issues we once faced. This country is facing an economy that has been radically transformed. You know, the largest retailer in the country, in the world today, Amazon, doesn't even own a single store, and these changes have been disruptive. They have changed people's lives. The jobs that once sustained our middle class, they either don't pay enough or they are gone. And we need someone that understands that as our nominee. If I'm our nominee, how is Hillary Clinton going to lecture me about living paycheck to paycheck? I was raised paycheck to paycheck. How is she going to lecture me? How is she going to lecture me about student loans? I owed over $100,000 just 4 years ago. If I'm our nominee, we will be the party of the future.
Governor Bush, you have insisted that you're your own man. You say you have a life experience uniquely your own, not your father's, not your brother's. But there are several opponents on this stage who get big applause lines in early voting states with this line, quote, "The last thing the country needs is another Bush in the Oval Office." So do you understand the real concern in this country about dynastic politics?
Absolutely, I do. And I'm going to run hard, run with heart, and run to win. I'm going to have to earn this. Maybe the bar is even higher for me. That's fine. I've got a record in Florida. I'm proud of my dad, and I'm certainly proud of my brother. In Florida, they call me Jeb because I earned it. I cut taxes every year, totaling $19 billion. We balanced every budget. We went from $1 billion of reserves to $9 billion of reserves. We were one of 2 states that went to AAA bond rating. They called me Vito Corleone because I vetoed 2,500 separate line items in the budget. I'm my own man. I govern as a conservative, and I governed effectively. And the net effect was, during my 8 years, 1.3 million jobs were created. We left the state better off because I applied conservative principles in a purple state the right way, and people rose up.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Trump, one of the things people love about you is you speak your mind and you don't use a politician's filter. However, that is not without its downsides, in particular when it comes to women. You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account...
Only Rosie O'Donnell.
No, it wasn't. Your Twitter account...
Thank you.
For the record, it was well beyond Rosie O'Donnell.
Yes, I'm sure it was.
Your Twitter account has several disparaging comments about women's looks. You once told a contestant on Celebrity Apprentice it would be a pretty picture to see her on her knees. Does that sound to you like the temperament of a man we should elect as president? And how will you answer the charge from Hillary Clinton, who is likely to be the Democratic nominee, that you are part of the war on women?
I think the big problem this country has is being politically correct. I've been challenged by so many people, and I don't frankly have time for total political correctness. And to be honest with you, this country doesn't have time either. This country is in big trouble. We don't win anymore. We lose to China. We lose to Mexico, both in trade and at the border. We lose to everybody. And frankly, what I say, and oftentimes it's fun, it's kidding, we have a good time, what I say is what I say. And honestly, Megan, if you don't like it, I'm sorry. I've been very nice to you, although I could probably maybe not be based on the way you have treated me, but I wouldn't do that. But you know what? We need strength, we need energy, we need quickness, and we need brain in this country to turn it around. That I can tell you right now.
Senator Cruz, your colleague, Senator Paul, right there next to you, said a few months ago he agrees with you on a number of issues, but he says you do nothing to grow the party. He says you feed red meat to the base, but you don't reach out to minorities. You have a toxic relationship with GOP leaders in Congress. You even called the Republican Senate leader, Mitch McConnell, a liar recently. How can you win in 2016 when you're such a divisive figure?
Chris, I believe the American people are looking for someone to speak the truth. If you're looking for someone to go to Washington, to go along, to get along, to agree with the career politicians in both parties who get in bed with the lobbyists and special interests, then I ain't your guy. There is a reason that we have $18 trillion in debt. Because as conservatives, as Republicans, we keep winning elections. We got a Republican House, we got a Republican Senate, and we don't have leaders who honor their commitments. I will always tell the truth and do what I said I would do.
Governor Christie, you're not exactly the darling of conservatives. You tout your record as a Republican governor in a blue state. On Facebook, the most people talking about you, not surprisingly, come from your state of New Jersey, and one of the top issues they are talking about is the economy. This may be why. Under your watch, New Jersey has undergone 9 credit rating downgrades. The state's 44th in private sector growth. You face an employee pension crisis, and the Garden State has the 3rd highest foreclosure rate in the country. So why should voters believe that your management of the country's finances would be any different?
If you think it's bad now, you should have seen it when I got there. Fact is, in the 8 years before I became governor, taxes and fees were raised at the state level 115 times. In the 8 years before I became governor, spending was increased 56%. And in the 8 years before I became governor, there was zero net private sector job growth in New Jersey. Zero. For 8 years. So what did we do? We came in, we balanced an $11 billion deficit on a $29 billion budget by cutting over 800 programs in the state budget. We brought the budget into balance with no tax increases. In fact, we vetoed 5 income tax increases during my time as governor. We cut business taxes $2.3 billion, and we cut regulation by 1/3 of what my predecessor put in place. And what's happened since? 192,000 new private sector jobs in the 5.5 years I've been governor. We have a lot of work to do in New Jersey, but I am darn proud of how we've brought our state back.
Governor Walker, you have consistently said that you want to make abortion illegal, even in cases of rape, incest, or to save the life of the mother. You recently signed an abortion law in Wisconsin that does have an exception for the mother's life, but you are on record as having objected to it. Would you really let a mother die rather than have an abortion? And with 83% of the American public in favor of a life exception, are you two out of the mainstream on this issue to win the general election?
Well, I'm pro-life. I've always been pro-life. And I've got a position I think is consistent with many Americans out there in that I believe that that is an unborn child that's in need of protection out there. And I've said many a time that that unborn child can be protected, and there are many other alternatives that will also protect the life of that mother. That's been consistently proven. Unlike Hillary Clinton, who has a radical position in terms of support for Planned Parenthood, I defunded Planned Parenthood more than 4 years ago, long before any of these videos came out. I've got a position that's in line with everyday America.
Governor Huckabee, like Governor Walker, you have staked out strong positions on social issues. You favor a constitutional amendment banning same-sex marriages. You favor a constitutional amendment banning abortions, except for the life of the mother. Millions of people in this country agree with you, but according to the polls, and again, this is an electability question, according to the polls, more people don't. So how do you persuade enough independents and Democrats to get elected in 2016?
Chris, I disagree with the idea that the real issue is a constitutional amendment. That's a long and difficult process. I've actually taken a position that's bolder than that. A lot of people are talking about defunding Planned Parenthood as if that's a huge game changer. I think it's time to do something even more bold. I think the next president ought to invoke the 5th and 14th Amendments to the Constitution, now that we clearly know that that baby inside the mother's womb is a person at the moment of conception. The reason we know that it is because of the DNA schedule that we now have clear scientific evidence on. And this notion that we just continue to ignore the personhood of the individual is a violation of that unborn child's 5th and 14th Amendment rights for due process and equal protection under the law. It's time that we recognize the Supreme Court is not the supreme being, and we change the policy to be pro-life and protect children instead of rip up their body parts and sell them like they're parts to a Buick.
Senator Paul, you recently blamed the rise of ISIS on Republican hawks. Now, you later said that statement, you could have said it better. But the statement went on, and you said, quote, everything they've talked about in foreign policy, they've been wrong for the last 20 years. Why are you so quick to blame your own party?
First of all, only ISIS is responsible for the terrorism. Only ISIS is responsible for the depravity. But we do have to examine how are we going to defeat ISIS. I've got a proposal. I'm the leading voice in America for not arming the allies of ISIS. I've been fighting amidst a lot of opposition from both Hillary Clinton as well as some Republicans who wanted to send arms to the allies of ISIS. ISIS rides around in $1 billion worth of U.S. Humvees. It's a disgrace. We ought to stop it. We shouldn't fund our enemies, for goodness sakes. So We didn't create ISIS. ISIS created themselves, but we will stop them, and one of the ways we stop them is by not funding them and by not arming them.
Governor Kasich. You chose to expand Medicaid in your state, unlike several other governors on this stage tonight, and it is already over budget by some estimates, costing taxpayers an additional $1.4 billion in just the first 18 months. You defended your Medicaid expansion by invoking God, saying to skeptics that when they arrive in heaven, St. Peter isn't going to ask them how small they've kept government, but what they have done for the poor. Why should Republican voters, who generally want to shrink government, believe that you won't use your St. Peter rationale to expand every government program?
Well, first of all, Megan, you should know that President Reagan expanded Medicaid 3 or 4 times. Secondly, I had an opportunity to bring resources back to Ohio to do what? To treat the mentally ill. 10,000 of them sit in our prisons. It costs $22,500 a year to keep them in prison. I'd rather get them their medication so they could lead a decent life. Secondly, we are rehabbing the drug addicted. 80% of the people in our prisons have addiction problems. We now treat them in the prisons, release them in the community, and the recidivism rate is 10%, and everybody across this country knows that the tsunami of drugs is threatening their very families. So we're treating them and getting them on their feet. And finally, the working poor, instead of them having come into the emergency rooms where it costs more, where they're sicker, and we end up paying, we brought a program in here to make sure that people could get on their feet. And you know what? Everybody has a right to their God-given purpose. And finally, our Medicaid is growing at one of the lowest rates in the country. And finally, we went from $8 billion in the hole to $2 billion in the black. We've cut $5 billion in taxes, and we've grown 350,000 jobs.
Gentlemen, we're turning to a new subject that all of you have been talking about and some of you have been disagreeing about, and that is the issue of immigration. Governor Bush, you released a new plan this week on illegal immigration, focusing on enforcement, which some suggest is your effort to show that you're not soft on that issue. I want to ask you about a statement that you made last year about illegal immigrants, and here's what you said. They broke the law, but it's not a felony. It's an act of love. It's an act of commitment to your family. Do you stand by that statement, and do you stand by your support for earned legal status?
I do. I believe that the great majority of people coming here illegally have no other option. They want to provide for their family. But we need to control our border. It's our responsibility to pick and choose who comes in. So I've written a book about this, and yes, this week I did come up with a comprehensive strategy that really mirrored what we said in the book, which is that we need to deal with E-Verify. We need to deal with people that come with a legal visa and overstay. We need to be much more strategic on how we deal with border enforcement, border security. We need to eliminate the sanctuary cities in this country. It is ridiculous and tragic that people are dying because of the fact that local governments are not following the federal law. There's much to do. And I think rather than talking about this as a wedge issue, which Barack Obama's done now for 6 long years, the next president, and I hope to be that president, will fix this once and for all so that we can turn this into a driver for high sustained economic growth. And there should be a path to earn legal status for those that are here. Not amnesty, earn legal status, which means you pay a fine and do many things over an extended period of time.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Trump, it has not escaped anybody's notice that you say that the Mexican government is sending criminals, rapists, drug dealers across the border. Governor Bush has called those remarks, quote, extraordinarily ugly. I'd like you're right next to him, talk to him directly and say how you respond to that, and you have repeatedly said that you have evidence that the Mexican government is doing this, but that you have evidence you have refused or declined to share. Why not use this first Republican presidential debate to share your proof with the American people?
So, if it weren't for me, you wouldn't even be talking about illegal immigration, Chris. You wouldn't even be talking about it. This was not a subject that was on anybody's mind until I brought it up at my announcement, and I said Mexico is sending. Except the reporters, because they're a very dishonest lot, generally speaking, in the world of politics, they didn't cover my statement the way I said it. The fact is, since then, many killings, murders, crime, drugs pouring across the border, our money going out and the drugs coming in. And I said, we need to build a wall, and it has to be built quickly. And I don't mind having a big, beautiful door in that wall so that people can come into this country legally. But we need, Jeb, to build a wall. We need to keep illegals out.
Mr. Trump, I'll give you 30 seconds. I'll give you 30 seconds to answer my question, which was, what evidence do you have, specific evidence, that the Mexican government is sending criminals across the border? 30 seconds.
Border Patrol, I was at the border last week. Border Patrol people that I deal with, that I talk to, they say this is what's happening because our leaders are stupid, our politicians are stupid, and the Mexican government is much smarter, much sharper, much more cunning, and they send the bad ones over because they don't want to pay for them, they don't want to take care of them. Why should they when the stupid leaders of the United States will do it for them? And that's what's happening, whether you like it or not.
Obviously, there's a lot more to talk about this. We're going to have more questions for the candidates on illegal immigration, plus other key topics, including your questions on Facebook. Welcome back to Fox News Facebook Republican Debate Night. We're going to continue the questions now on illegal immigration. We kind of ended with a cliffhanger there, so let's continue the conversation. Governor Kasich, I know you don't like to talk about Donald Trump, but I do want to ask you about the merit of what he just said. When you say that the American government is stupid, that the Mexican government is sending criminals, that we're being bamboozled, is that an adequate response to the question of illegal immigration?
Chris, first of all, I was just saying to Chris Christie, they say we're outspoken. We need to take lessons from Donald Trump if we're really going to learn it. Hey, here's the thing about Donald Trump. Donald Trump's hitting a nerve in this country. He is. He's hitting a nerve. People are frustrated. They're fed up. They don't think the government is working for them. And for people that want to just tune him out, they're making a mistake. Now, he's got his solutions. Some of us have other solutions. You know, look, I balanced the federal budget as one of the chief architects when I was in Washington. Hadn't been done since. I was a military reformer. I took the state of Ohio from an $8 billion hole and a 350,000 job loss to a $2 billion surplus and a gain of 350,000 jobs.
Respectfully, can we talk about illegal immigration?
But the point is that we all have solutions. Mr. Trump is touching a nerve because people want the wall to be built. They want to see an end to illegal immigration. They want to see it, and we all do. But we all have different ways of getting there, and you're going to hear from all of us tonight about what our ideas are.
All right. Well, Senator Rubio, let me see if I can do better with you.
Yeah.
Is it as simple as our leaders are stupid, their leaders are smart, and all of these illegals coming over are criminals?
Well, let me set the record straight on a couple of things. The first is the evidence is now clear that the majority of people coming across the border are not from Mexico. They're coming from Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras. Those countries are the source of the people that are now coming in its majority. I also believe we need a fence. The problem is if El Chapo builds a tunnel under the fence, we have to be able to deal with that too. And that's why you need an E-Verify system and you need an entry-exit tracking system and all sorts of other things to prevent illegal immigration. But I agree with what Governor Kasich just said. People are frustrated. This is the most generous country in the world when it comes to immigration. There are 1 million people a year who legally immigrate to the United States. And people feel like we're being taken advantage of. We feel like despite our generosity, we are being taken advantage of. And let me tell you who never gets talked about in these debates. The people that call my office, who have been waiting for 15 years to come to the United States. And they paid their fees, and they hired a lawyer, and they can't get in. And they're wondering maybe they should come illegally. And so these are important issues, and we should address it. It's a serious problem that needs to be addressed. And otherwise, we're going to keep talking about this for the next 30 years like we have for the last 30 years.
Governor Walker, Governor Walker, from 2002 till as recently as 2013, just 2 years ago, you supported comprehensive immigration reform, including a path to citizenship. Now you say that was a quick reaction to something you hadn't really thought about and that you've changed your mind. Other than politics, could you explain why in the last 2 years you've changed your position on a path to citizenship, and are there other past positions that we shouldn't hold you to?
Yeah, well, Chris, I actually said it on your show earlier this year.
Yes,
flat out said, I acknowledge that. I said I actually listened to the American people, and I think people across America want a leader who's actually going to listen to them. I talked to border state governors and other elected officials. I looked at how this president, particularly through last November, messed up the immigration system in this country. And most importantly, I listened to the people of America. I believe we need to secure the border. I've been to the border with Governor Abbott in Texas and others, seeing the problems that they have there. There's international criminal organizations penetrating our southern-based borders, and we need to do something about it. Secure the border, enforce the law, no amnesty, and go forward with a legal immigration system that gives priority to American working families and wages.
Senator Cruz, some 1,400 people submitted questions on this very hot topic of illegal immigration on Facebook, and a number of them were about the murder of Kate Steinle in San Francisco, allegedly shot down by an illegal. Doug Betancourt sent this question: will you support Kate Steinle's law, which would impose a mandatory 5-year prison term for an illegal who's deported and then returns to this country? And will you defund sanctuary cities for violating federal law?
Chris, absolutely yes. And not only will I support it, I have authored Kate's law in the United States Senate and filed that legislation. I tried to get the Senate to vote to pass Kate's law on the floor of the Senate just 1 week ago, and the leader of our own party blocked a vote on Kate's law. You know, there was reference made to our leaders being stupid. It's not a question of stupidity. It's that they don't want to enforce the immigration laws. That there are far too many in the Washington cartel that support amnesty. President Obama's talked about fundamentally transforming this country. There's 7 billion people across the face of the globe, many of whom want to come to this country. If they come legally, great, but if they come illegally and they get amnesty, that is how we fundamentally change this country, and it really is striking. A majority of the candidates on this stage have supported amnesty. I have never supported amnesty, and I led the fight against Chuck Schumer's Gang of 8 amnesty legislation in the Senate.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to switch topics now and talk a bit about terror and national security. Governor Christie, you have said that Senator Paul's opposition to the NSA's collection of phone records has made the United States weaker and more vulnerable, even going so far as to say that he should be called before Congress to answer for it if we should be hit by another terrorist attack. Do you really believe you can assign blame to Senator Paul just for opposing the bulk collection of people's phone records in the event of a terrorist attack?
Yes, I do. And I'll tell you why. Because I'm the only person on this stage who's actually filed applications under the Patriot Act, who have gone before the federal, the Foreign Intelligence Service Court, who has prosecuted and investigated and jailed terrorists in this country after September 11th. I was appointed U.S. Attorney by President Bush on September 10th, 2001, and the world changed enormously the next day. And it happened in my state. This is not theoretical to me. I went to the funerals. We lost friends of ours in the Trade Center that day. My own wife was 2 blocks from the Trade Center that day at her office, having gone through it that morning. When you actually have to be responsible for doing this, you can do it, and we did it for 7 years in my office, respecting civil liberties and protecting the homeland. And I will make no apologies ever for protecting the lives and the safety of the American people. We have to give more tools to our folks to be able to do that, not fewer, and then trust those people and oversee them to do it the right way. As president, that is exactly what I'll do.
Megan, may I respond? May I respond?
Go ahead, sir.
I want to collect more records from terrorists, but less records from innocent Americans. The Fourth Amendment was what we fought the revolution over. John Adams said it was the spark that led to our war for independence. And I'm proud of standing for the Bill of Rights, and I will continue to stand for the Bill of Rights.
And Megan, Megan, that's a completely ridiculous answer. I want to collect more records from terrorists, but less records from other people. How are you supposed to know, Megan?
Use the Fourth Amendment.
How are you supposed
Use
to?
the Fourth
I'll tell you how you
get a warrant.
Let me tell you something.
Get a judge to sign a warrant.
Senator.
Go ahead, wait, Governor Christie, make your point.
Listen, Senator, when you're sitting in a subcommittee just blowing hot air about this, you can say things like that. When you're responsible for protecting the lives of the American people, then what you need to do is to make sure that you use the system the way it's supposed to work.
Here's the problem, Governor. You fundamentally misunderstand the Bill of Rights. Every time you did a case, you got a warrant from a judge. I'm talking about searches without warrants, indiscriminately of all Americans' records, and that's what I fought to end. I don't trust President Obama with our records. I know you gave him a big hug, and if you want to give him a big hug again, go right ahead.
And Senator Paul, the hugs that I remember are the hugs that I gave to the families who lost their people on September 11th. Those are the hugs I remember, and those had nothing to do with politics. Unlike what you're doing by cutting speeches on the floor of the Senate, then putting them on the internet within a half an hour to raise money for your campaign, and while still putting our country at risk.
All right, we're going to cut it off there. We have plenty more we want to get to. That was an interesting exchange. Thank you for that. Well, I want to move on because I have we're going to get to you, Governor, but I really want to get to a Facebook questioner. His name is Alex Shalgren, and he has the following question.
My question is, how would the candidates stop the treacherous actions of ISIL, and its growing influence in the U.S. if they were to become president?
Senator Cruz, I want to talk to you about this because many of the Facebook users and the folks on Facebook wanted the candidates to speak to ISIS tonight. You asked the chairman of the Joint Chiefs a question. What would it take to destroy ISIS in 90 days? He told you ISIS will only be truly destroyed once they are rejected by the populations in which they hide. And then you accused him of pushing Medicaid for the Iraqis. How would you destroy ISIS in 90 days?
Megan, we need a commander-in-chief that speaks the truth. We will not defeat radical Islamic terrorism so long as we have a president unwilling to utter the words radical Islamic terrorism. When I asked General Dempsey, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, what would be required militarily to destroy ISIS, he said, there is no military solution. We need to change the conditions on the ground so that young men are not in poverty and susceptible to radicalization. That, with all due respect, is nonsense. It's the same answer the State Department gave, that we need to give them jobs. What we need is a commander-in-chief who makes clear, if you join ISIS, if you wage jihad on America, then you are signing your death warrant.
You don't see it as an ideological problem? An ideological problem in addition to a military one.
Megan, of course it's an ideological problem. That's one of the reasons why I introduced the Expatriate Terrorist Act in the Senate that said if any American travels to the Middle East and joins ISIS, that he or she forfeits their citizenship so they don't use a passport to come back and wage jihad on Americans. Yes, it is ideological, and let me contrast President Obama, who at the prayer breakfast essentially acted as an apologist. He said, well, gosh, the Crusades, the Inquisitions. We need a president that shows the courage that Egypt's President al-Sisi did, a Muslim, when he called out the radical Islamic terrorists who are threatening the world.
Governor Bush. For days on end in this campaign, you struggled to answer a question about whether, knowing what we know now, you would have invaded Iraq.
Megan.
I remember it too. And ISIS, of course, is now thriving there. You finally said no. To the families of those who died in that war, who say they liberated a country and deposed a ruthless dictator, how do you look at them now and say your brother's war was a mistake?
Knowing what we know now, with faulty intelligence and not having security be the first priority when we invaded, it was a mistake. I wouldn't have gone in. However, for the people that did lose their lives and the families that suffered because of it, I know this full well, because as governor of the state of Florida, I called every one of them. every one of them that I could find, to tell them that I was praying for them, that I cared about them, and it was really hard to do. And every one of them said that their child did not die in vain, or their wife or husband did not die in vain. And so why it was difficult for me to do it was based on that. Here's the lesson that we should take from this, which relates to this whole subject. Barack Obama became president, and he abandoned Iraq. He left, and when he left, Al-Qaeda was done for. ISIS was created because of the void that we left, and that void now exists as a caliphate the size of Indiana. To honor the people that died, we need to stop the Iran agreement for sure, because the Iranian mullahs have their blood on their hands, and we need to take out ISIS with every tool at our disposal.
Governor Walker, in February you said that we needed to gain partners in the Arab world. Which Arab country not already in the U.S.-led coalition has the potential to be our greatest partner?
What about additional ones? We need to focus on the ones we have. You look at Egypt, probably the best relationship we've had in Israel, at least in my lifetime, incredibly important. You look at the Saudis. In fact, earlier this year, I met with Saudi leaders and leaders from the United Arab Emirates, and I asked them, what's the greatest challenge in the world today? Set aside the Iran deal. They said it's the disengagement of America. We are leading from behind under the Obama-Clinton doctrine. America's a great country. We need to stand up and start leading again, and we'd have allies not just in Israel, but throughout the Persian Gulf.
Dr. Carson, in one of his first acts as Commander-in-Chief, President Obama signed an executive order banning enhanced interrogation techniques in fighting terror. As president, would you bring back waterboarding?
Well, thank you, Megan. I wasn't sure I was going to get to talk again.
We have a lot for you. Don't worry. Fear not. You may rue that request.
All right. You know, what we do in order to get the information that we need is our business. And I wouldn't necessarily be broadcasting to everybody what we're going to do. You know, we've gotten into this mindset of fighting politically correct wars. There is no such thing as a politically correct war. And the left, of course, will say Carson doesn't believe in the Geneva Convention. Carson doesn't believe in fighting stupid wars. And what we have to remember is we want to utilize the tremendous intellect that we have in the military to win wars. And I've talked to a lot of the generals, a lot of our advanced people, and believe me, if we gave them the mission, which is what the Commander-in-Chief does, they would be able to carry it out. And if we don't tie their hands behind their back, they will do it extremely effectively.
Gentlemen, the next series of questions deals with Obamacare and the role of the federal government. Mr. Trump, Obamacare is one of the things you call a disaster.
Complete disaster, yes.
Saying it needs to be repealed and replaced.
Correct.
Now, 15 years ago, you called yourself a liberal on health care. You were for a single-payer system, a Canadian-style system. Why were you for that then, and why aren't you for it now?
First of all, I'd like to just go back to in July of 2004, I came out strongly against the war with Iraq because it was going to destabilize the Middle East, and I'm the only one on the stage that knew that and had the vision to say it, and that's exactly what happened. The Middle East became totally destabilized. So I just want to say, as far as single payer, it works in Canada, it works incredibly well in Scotland. It could have worked in a different age, which is the age you're talking about here. What I'd like to see is a private system without the artificial lines around every state. I have a big company with thousands and thousands of employees, and if I'm negotiating in New York or in New Jersey or in California, I have like one bidder. Nobody can bid. You know why? Because the insurance companies are making a fortune because they have control of the politicians, of course with the exception of the politicians on the stage, but they have total control of the politicians. They're making a fortune. Get rid of the artificial lines and you will have yourself great plans. And then we have to take care of the people that can't take care of themselves, and I will do that through a different system.
Hey, Mr. Trump, hold on one second.
I got a news flash.
I know, hold on, Senator Paul.
News flash, the Republican Party's been fighting against a single-payer system for a decade. So I think you're on the wrong side of this if you're still arguing for a single-payer system.
I don't think you heard me. You're having a hard time tonight.
All right, Mr. Trump, it's not just your past support for single-payer health care. You've also supported a host of other liberal policies. You've also donated to several Democratic candidates, Hillary Clinton included, Nancy Pelosi. You explained away those donations, saying you did that to get business-related favors. And you said recently, quote, "When you give, they do whatever the hell you want them to do."
You better believe it.
So what specifically did they do?
If I ask them, if I need them, you know, most of the people on this stage I've given to, just so you understand. A lot of money.
Not me. Not me. But you're welcome to give me a check, Donald, if you'd like.
Many of them.
Actually, to be clear,
That's
he
right.
supported
Not
Charlie Crist.
Not Mike.
Hey, Charlie,
but I have...
Donald, if you end your campaign, I hope you will give to me.
Good.
Okay.
Sounds good. Sounds good to me, Governor. I will tell you that our system is broken. I give to many people. Before 2 months ago, I was a businessman. I give to everybody. When they call, I give. And you know what? When I need something from them 2 years later, 3 years later, I call them. They are there for me.
So what'd
and
you
that's
get?
a broken system.
So what'd you get from Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi?
Well, I'll tell you what. With Hillary Clinton, I said, be at my wedding, and she came to my wedding. You know why? She had no choice because I gave. I gave to a foundation that, frankly, that foundation is supposed to do good. I didn't know her money would be used on private jets going all over the world. It was. But, okay?
Mr. Trump, thank you. Hold on. We're gonna move on. We'll come back to you, Governor Walker.
Just 1 second on this, though. We spend a lot of time talking about Hillary Clinton and pitting us back and forth. Let's be clear. We should be talking about Hillary Clinton on that last subject, because everywhere in the world that Hillary Clinton touched is more messed up today than before she and the
We have many questions to come. Many questions to come. Governor Huckabee, on Facebook, John Pritrioni asks this: will you abolish or take away the powers and cut the size of the EPA, the IRS, the Department of Education? Now, broadly, the size of government is a big concern for Facebook users, Facebook persons, as well as, obviously, conservatives. But year after year, decade after decade, there are promises from Republicans to shrink government. But year after year, decade after decade, it doesn't happen. In fact, it gets bigger, even under Republican politicians. So the question is, at this point, is the government simply too big for any one person, even a Republican, to shrink?
It's not too big to shrink. But the problem is we have a Wall Street to Washington axis of power that has controlled the political climate. The donor class feeds the political class, who does the dance that the donor class wants. And the result is federal government keeps getting bigger. Every person on this stage who has been a governor will tell you that the biggest fight they had was not the other party, wasn't even the legislature. It was the federal government, who continually put mandates on the states that we had to suck up and pay for. And the fact is, there are a lot of things happening at the federal level that are absolutely beyond the jurisdiction of the Constitution. This is power that should be shifted back to the states, whether it's the EPA. There is no role at the federal level for the Department of Education. And I'm still one who says that we can get rid of the Internal Revenue Service if we would pass the fair tax, which is a tax on consumption, rather than a tax on people's income, and move power back where the founders believed it should have been all along.
Dr. Carson, Dr. Carson, do you agree with that?
What I agree with is that we need a significantly changed taxation system. And the one that I've advocated is based on tithing, because I think God's a pretty fair guy. And he said, you know, if you give me a tithe, it doesn't matter how much you made. If you had a bumper crop, you don't owe me triple tithes, and you had no crops at all, you don't owe me no tithes. So there must be something inherently fair about that, and that's why I've advocated a proportional tax system. You make $10 billion, you pay $1 billion. You make $10, you pay $1. And everybody gets treated the same way. And you get rid of the deductions, you get rid of all the loopholes. And
Governor Bush.
And I have a lot more to say about it.
We're going to come back to you, Dr. Carson. Governor Bush, you are one of the few people on this stage who advocates for Common Core education standards, reading and math. A lot of people on this stage vigorously oppose federal involvement in education. They say it should all be handled locally. President Obama's Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, has said that most of the criticism of Common Core is due to a, quote, fringe group of critics. Do you think that's accurate?
No, I don't, and I don't believe the federal government should be involved in the creation of standards directly or indirectly, the creation of curriculum or content. That is clearly a state responsibility. I'm for higher standards, measured in an intellectually honest way, with abundant school choice, ending social promotion, and I know how to do this because as governor of the state of Florida, I created the first statewide voucher program in the country, the second statewide voucher program in the country, and the third statewide voucher program in the country. And we had rising student achievement across the board because high standards, robust accountability, ending social promotion in third grade, real school choice across the board, challenging the teachers union and beating them is the way to go. And Florida's low-income kids had the greatest gains inside the country. Our graduation rate improved by 50%. That's what I'm for.
Senator Rubio, why is Governor Bush wrong on Common Core?
Well, first of I too believe in curriculum reform. It's critically important in the 21st century. We do need curriculum reform, and it should happen at the state and local level. That is where educational policy belongs. Because if a parent is unhappy with what their child is being taught in school, they can go to that local school board or their state legislature or their governor and get it changed. Here's the problem with Common Core. The Department of Education, like every federal agency, will never be satisfied. They will not stop with it being a suggestion. They will turn it into a mandate. In fact, what they will begin to say to local communities is, you will not get federal money unless you do things the way we want you to do it, and they will use Common Core or any other requirements that exist nationally to force it down the throats of our people in our states.
And you agree with your old friend?
He's definitely my friend, and I think the states ought to create these standards. And if states want to opt out of Common Core, fine. Just make sure your standards are high. Because today in America, a third of our kids, after we spend more per student than any country in the world other than a couple of rounding errors, to be honest with you, 30% are college and or career ready. If we are going to compete in this world we're in today, there's no possible way we can do it with lowering expectations and dumbing down everything. Children are going to suffer and families' hearts are going to be broken that their kids won't be able to get a job in the 21st century.
We have many more questions coming on a host of topics here from Quicken Loans Arena in Cleveland. Stay with us.
What would make you stand out as the best choice for the Republican nomination?
How do you intend to go about student loan reform?
What will be the first thing you will do to stimulate economic growth in our country and bring more jobs to the United States?